We are also online with Bruno Baran. Bruno Baran is the director of Syngenta France for some concluding words for our morning session. Can you hear us, Mr. Baran? Yes, that's perfect, and we can hear you loud and clear. Good morning to all of you. First of all, I would like to apologize to all of the panelists because you were talking about COVID, and yesterday I found out that I'm a contact case. So I'm here, so I couldn't attend the forum today. And even though my test was negative, I thought it was better for me not to attend the forum. I would like to thank our Minister for Agriculture for his video this morning. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few concluding words for this morning session with Pierre-Olivier Drège, President of ELO. Thank you for the organization of this event as well. I think that it's even more commendable in this current context, and it's a great way of fostering interactions. This morning, I was really struck by the open approach of the various speakers that drew the same conclusions. We really want to have an open discussion, including all opinions. And this morning, I think that the roundtables really showed that we can have a respectful discussion, as did former Commissioner Potocnik stated. So I think that it is through such discussions that we can find the right convergence to move forward. And I would also like to add that Syngenta is very proud to be a part of this forum. This morning, very strong convictions were shared, and I would like to go back to one of them. First of all, climate change is one of the greatest challenges facing agriculture right now. In 2020, there was a global study that showed that 70% of farmers are concerned about their production capacities, and 60% of them have already experienced climate-related issues. So the volatility of agricultural production will increase, putting more pressure on global food security. And this is very obvious. Now, the second element that is directly related to this is that agriculture is part of the problem, of course. But this morning, I think that we all understood that agriculture can and must be at the core of the solution. One of the speakers, I think it was our senator, who highlighted the fact that agriculture can play a strategic role in this. There were also some convictions on the compensation of agriculture. As our minister was saying this morning, France is a major agricultural power, and France needs to remain an agricultural power. I totally agree with this statement, but I think that we can only have a strong agricultural sector with a stronger rural sector and with the right pay for our farmers. And this is key. And I'd like to add that this should be done in a peaceful way while complying with the rules and laws of our country. Now, regarding sovereignty, of course, food sovereignty is a major challenge, and the figures shared by Mr. Brun are particularly compelling. And we also talked about population increase throughout the world. And with this demographic growth, we know that this is a challenge that we definitely have to tackle. And agriculture is there to feed and nourish, as our minister recalled. And so, in my opinion, the purpose of France in Europe is to remain one of the major players in this, meaning that France must remain a major agricultural exporter. So there are three main conclusions that we can draw from this. First of all, we need to produce better, yes, but we need to produce more while being more competitive. So as you can see, it's a difficult equation, and it's difficult to find the right solution while keeping in mind the expectations from citizens and consumers. But there were a few ideas that emerged from this morning session that I thought were particularly interesting. First of all, European and French regulations need to focus on three main objectives at the same time: economic performance of farms, the sustainability of practices, and meeting societal expectations. And this is what Dominique Chargé called competitiveness while being involved in a transition. The second point that I wanted to mention is that to solve this equation, farmers need to have a whole toolbox at their disposal. And this toolbox should not be emptied before it can be filled, meaning that we need solutions, including technological solutions. And I'm a big supporter of that solution. Because rapeseed is a very good example with the pest infestation this autumn. And in 3 years, we had a strong decrease in the land dedicated to rapeseed production in France. So, as Mathieu Brun mentioned, with our this combined approach, we'll be able to improve sustainability. There are some tools that were mentioned. First of all, agricultural science and genetics as well, with crop selection, biostimulation, biocontrol. And we'll have to watch carefully the regulations for this on the market. Synthetic chemistry as well, which can be improved through artificial intelligence and also state-of-the-art precision agriculture, automation, robotics, etc. So there are some new technologies that are emerging so that farmers can use these tools to work faster in a more sustainable way. The combination of all of these solutions will help meet this challenge. In my opinion, there is not just one single solution. And so what do we do tangibly? Well, I think that we need to speed up the pace for this combination of solutions. And there is one leverage that was mentioned in the first roundtable. We need to have a powerful innovation system that needs to emerge. This was mentioned by Senator Sophie Primas. And Syngenta, as a business, is determined to play a major role in this through more partnerships and through the support to more startup companies. And I also wanted to highlight something that was mentioned by our minister. Well, this is part of a long-term approach. We need 10 years to develop a new variety of seed or a new plant protection product. And in order to do this, we need a lot of investment. For instance, our business invests 10% of its revenue in this every year. So we need this to be transparent, and we need a dynamic support to research. So I had 2 other points to mention, if you'll allow me. agriculture is supplying a service to a society, a service that it's not paid for. First of all, carbon storage in order to decrease greenhouse gases emissions. This is why we want to accelerate the proactive measures in order to favor carbon storage. And this is how we could create economic value from these environmental schemes. And then there's regenerative agriculture. Syngenta is very much involved in this. The objective is to increase productivity, plant potential, while respecting soil quality and promoting ecosystem health and biodiversity, while preserving water resources, aiming at a carbon neutral production. So this is a very ambitious goal, but this is really at the core of all of our research programs right now. So regarding the means and resources to meet these objectives, well, we will keep on promoting partnerships, discussions, dialogues, similar to the discussions that we had this morning. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Bruno Baran, and please stay with us for just a few more minutes. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Drège. Well, this morning session was particularly rich, and I think that it would be difficult to summarize it in just a few words. I think that with FNSI, with ELO, what we tried to do was to initiate this high-level discussion. This is exactly what happened this morning. And Janez Potočnik asked us the right question, meaning that climate challenges, environmental challenges, well, very clearly, it's no longer optional. It is something that we have to deal with. And this is something that was apparent throughout the various speakers' contributions. Sophie Prima called our attention to a particular point. Indeed, the reforms implemented as part of the Common Agricultural Policy could lead the EU to make an implicit decision of degrowth or negative growth. And this could entail implications that were not well assessed when the decision was taken. This discussion was very interesting. Indeed, everyone contributed to that discussion based on their own background and their own knowledge. And all of the panelists tried to answer this initial question while avoiding the risk of renouncing an indispensable food sovereignty. And farmers themselves should not be the victims of this evolution, while they are rather a solution to face this major challenge. Among the various proposals and thoughts that were shared, I identified 4 solutions or 4 possible responses that I thought could lead to major changes that we will need to implement in the coming months. So this is true at a European level, but also at national level. First of all, and before I go into more details, there is one element that was highlighted. So we should not just focus only on quantities, but we should rather overhaul our organization and our vision of agriculture and food. We should review the systems that we've been using for the past decades. And I think that the most telling example was that change of balance in the changes of diet habits of consumers. When we see more and more consumers switching from animal-based diet to a plant-based diet. And this is definitely to take into account for future changes. Now, regarding the possible solutions and regarding the possible investigations for the future, I notice that innovation is fundamental. Innovation can help us overcome what could look like a contradiction between various goals. Innovation is absolutely essential, and these challenges are still not met with the solutions. So innovations in the field of robotics, digital innovations or biocontrol innovations will be fundamental. There are also disruptive innovations that could be used in this process and that could lead to solutions that could be marginal at first, but that could gain ground in the future. Secondly, something that was very much discussed, in particular in the second roundtable, but also in the speech by the Minister of Agriculture. It's the regime of international trade. It is very clear, as it was recalled several times, that we need to keep an open market. We are a continent that is open to the world because we need the imports from major global partners, and also because we also export much of our agricultural and food production. Therefore, there is no question that we need to make sure that our market remains open. However, we should think about the provisions regulating such an open market. This is why we could think of new standards from a climate or environmental point of view. These new standards cannot be implemented only in Europe unilaterally without thinking about the principle of reciprocity. And this is what led us to mirror clauses. There are major negotiations, major talks that are ongoing between our various partners. And the objective is to make sure that there is no unfair competition between our various countries to make sure that these decisions are do not go against our very objectives. And we therefore need to make sure that these new requirements for the agricultural and food chain are sustainable. So the mirror clauses from a legal point of view, from an integration point of view, should be taken into account also at the level of WTO. But we should also look into imported deforestation because this is another aspect of the same thing. The third element that I thought was mentioned more implicitly by the various speakers was, I thought, a very interesting question. It was the questioning of the foundations that led to the current decisions in the CAP, which have not yet been implemented. How can we try and go beyond some divisions that are related to models that are described as being opposed to each other? While these agricultural models could actually be complementary, because these directions can seem very different. For instance, if we compare conventional and organic agriculture. But how can we go beyond these divisions, and how can we have a change of paradigm? How can we assess these systems that are very diverse in France? Because in France, we have many different types of agricultural systems in terms of production and in terms of routes. And so how can we go beyond these divisions to have a different kind of assessment? And I'm thinking in particular of the ability to meet all of these challenges at the same time, namely providing abundant food supply, healthy food, but also taking into account the impact on the environment. And we should not forget about the actual impact on biodiversity and climate change mitigation. And we might come to realize that there are actually fewer differences between these models than it seems at first sight. And there is actually more convergence than we might think. One last point. This is what was mentioned about the fundamental role that will be played by consumers. The suggestion that was made about this discussion of on farm to fork, some speakers looked at it the other way around, fork to farm. And this is very interesting because European authorities, national authorities, businesses can make decisions, but the actual driver is the individual and collective decisions taken by consumers. And of course, one of the fundamental questions that was asked is that why consumers are looking for high quality, healthy food, abundant food, while at the same time we need to ask ourselves, will consumers be ready to pay a higher price for their food, taking into account all of these environmental concerns? Say, it was recalled by Mr. Thirouin when he said that there could be an imbalance in the grain market with a supply that could be greater than demand. So we need to look into consumer behavior. There's a distinction that should be drawn between the claimed need and then the need in terms of behavior. And this will have a great impact on the new CAP as it is being designed and implemented? And do we need consumers to get all of the information related to this? Do they need readable, straightforward information to make sure that they can make an informed choice? So these are the maybe not conclusions that we can draw, but it's definitely food for thought. And this will be fed into our future discussions. And at the occasion of this forum for the future of agriculture, we are discussing this in Paris, but it will also be covered in March in Brussels during our next forum. And I strongly encourage you to attend the next forum in March in Brussels. And I hope that we will be able to do this in person. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank all of the speakers for their very interesting inputs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Drej, and thank you to Mr. Baran.